happy he's here. He's a comedian. You've seen him all over on movies. He's been on Benchwarmers. He's been on the Mad Max, The Ring. He's, oh my gosh, he's been in the Barry and Rose show. He's been with real Rob Schneider. Who gets to be with Rob Schneider? Most people don't even know what a Schneider is. It's a meat cutter. You know, like this guy, he's wearing a Nike hat. I'm from Oregon. This is going to go so well. Welcome to this little tiny stage of mine. Be amazing. He's been a host when Jeff Peterson's band got back together in 2010, the Night Riot. This guy knows about heavy metal like nobody else. So who else was a better host? So welcome, Earl Skakel. Hi, Earl.
Well, thank you. It's very nice to be here, Linda.
It's wonderful to be here. I follow your Facebook Lives. I think you're hilarious when you're not even trying.
Well, I do my best, and not everyone's going to like you. You just try and get as many people to like you as you can.
You have a real dry delivery, don't you?
It's very dry. I got that probably from both my parents, neither of which were comedians, but they were both funny, and I kind of combined their two personalities into my style I use now. So it seems to work for me.
Yeah, I'll say. You've had quite the career. I noticed that you grew up in West Hollywood, or you came from West Hollywood all the way to LA.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up actually in Bel Air, which is just west of West Hollywood, and I moved to West Hollywood, and I love it here. I mean, it's a very gay neighborhood, but I don't mind. Like it's very it's central for if you're a comic and a cartoon actor. Everything's 10 minutes in either direction to you, so it's very ideal location. Not with LA traffic, you have to kind of pick a spot where you're central.
Yes, I lived in Koreatown for a whole year. You can get out and run maybe 2 errands in a whole day in LA.
Yeah, I mean, if I lived in Koreatown, like the cartoon work I do in Santa Monica would take 40 minutes to an hour each way. And
I really want to know about who you were as a kid, to comedy, to acting, and heavy metal. I kind of want to shut up for a change and let you take the stage and tell people as if they never knew you before. Who are you? How did this happen? What were the lucky breaks? What was the hard work?
Well, I am Barry Jelly, as you can see. That is a pumpkin. And I am, the typical class clown. Always got by on laughs in grade school and high school, and used it as a way to deflect the bullying I got back then. Back then the bullying was, like, in some ways it's easier today to bully someone because you can just go on your keyboard and, say this person's fat, or, this girl's a whore, or whatever. But back then, when I was in school in the 80s, you got bullied to your face. So you had to come up with ways to deflect whatever they were saying. So I was always pretty funny. And, I used humor as a way to, a defense mechanism.
Yes.
And then, I didn't start comedy till I was 30, which is very late. And it's probably the only regret I have is not starting sooner. But, here I am at the age of 51, still slinging it out. So
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, it really is like being in the Army. I mean, I often say Axl Rose was right. LA comedy is a jungle.
Wow.
So, but I think if you're in it for the right reasons, you survive all the insanity. Like, I'm not in it to be famous or make money. Because if you're in it to make money or be famous, you'll quit after 6 months.
Absolutely.
So,
Tell me
especially
about
in LA.
Yeah. Tell me about your knowledge, overwhelming knowledge about heavy metal. How did that, are you just a geek? Or did you like, were you ever in a band or what's the
No,
deal?
no, I have no musical talent. I just like, I grew up in the 80s in LA, and of course, that was the epicenter of, the heavy metal, the glam metal movement of, an early, it was a weird time musically in the early 80s because you had the rock bands of the 70s were kind of fading in popularity. Even Kiss was their first few albums in the 80s weren't doing very well at all. And then, you had bands like the Cars, who are pop. They were dominating the charts. So about 82, 83 bands out of LA were like Quiet Riot, Rat, Motley Crue. They kind of kickstarted the movement of guys who look like girls and entertainment. And the music wasn't necessarily at the forefront of their marketing. uh, I think they were like prettier versions of Van Halen. I mean, Van Halen, it was the music was the front and center, obviously, with Eddie Van Halen on guitar and his brother, a very accomplished drummer, and Michael Anthony, a great bass player, and then the perfect front man and David Lee Roth. But I think the LA music scene, I literally grew up in the middle of it. So I became a fan of that kind of music. The videos, MTV was just kind of blowing up. And so I'm just a fan, and I'm still a fan to this day. Like Rat, their song "Round and Round" has just re-entered the Billboard Top 20 charts because they're in that Geico commercial, and so it's kind of funny to see it be somewhat relevant in 2020, 40 years later.
Wow, that's cool. So, are you allowed to say without getting sued who your favorite rock group is?
Oh, I would say Rat and Kiss. As you can see, I have a Kiss T-shirt on. It's actually from their 1980 album Unmasked, which was funny enough, Kiss trying to sound like the Cars. Uh, you know, that was a big, Kiss always copycatted bands. Like when their popularity was fading a little bit, like if the Cars were popular, they would put out an album that sounded like the Cars. And then I think Pink Floyd did The Wall, and so Kiss did a concept album called The Elder. And then once the Rats and the Motley Crues and Quiet Riots were popular, they put out an album that kind of sounded like them. And then once the Bon Jovis and Def Leppards started coming around, Kiss put out an album where it was called Asylum, and their stage outfits, they look like B. Arthur. Like, they just had heavy makeup and shiny sequin gowns, and then a
You never
grunge.
joined the Marines.
Yeah, I mean, then grunge came in the '90s, and they was put out an album that sounded like Nirvana, and they were always chasing the next thing, which I kind of like, and I kind of don't like, because you take a band like Rat or Motley Crue, they always pretty much stay true to their roots. Like, this is how we sound, this is the music we play. We realize it's not popular anymore, but we're still going to do it. And those bands are still around.
Yeah. I like it when somebody knows their lane and they stay in their lane. But then you've got people like Madonna that, artists that change, even J-Lo, they change things up to stay current. Like, I can't tell you how many times Madonna has reinvented herself.
I mean, it's tough, but I mean, in some ways you have to if you want to stay relevant. And but if you're an actual true artist, you'll stick to your roots. Like Springsteen has never really strayed from his his style, which is like a modern day folk singer, I guess. Bob Seger never really strayed from his style. Metal bands tend to because they all looked ridiculous after Nirvana came out. So but then a band like Bon Jovi, he pretty much, or I say they, it's really his band. They kind of they strayed a little bit, but still remained, their musical stylings. So it's each band's different. It's like comics. You see comics when, like when Dane Cook became very popular. A lot of comics were like, well, that's how I have to do comedy. And then you had the drier style of humor coming in, like a Steve Byrne or
Even right.
Brody. Yeah, Stephen Wright, of course. And then you had comics who, well, I have to perform like that. And, so you see it in comedy, I think, more than anything, when heavier set comics like a Ralphie May become popular, then agencies are like, well, we need a fat comic. Well, they're not that funny yet. Well, who cares? They're fat. Fat's funny. So a lot of times in comedy, I can't speak for music. It's the agency and manager's faults of, like, say, pushing a heavy set comic, even though they're not ready yet, because heavy comics are in vogue.
Absolutely. So you've been doing comedy how many years? 20 some? 20?
I mean, I've been doing it so long, I honestly don't remember when I started. I'll say around 99. So I'll say 20 years. So I still enjoy it. I'm still in it for the reasons I got into it in the first place. So
To make people laugh?
Yeah, I like doing it, and I'm good at it to a certain extent. So I see some people, they're in it, like I said, to be famous or you know to make money, and even if you start making money, if that's the only reason you're in it for, you won't last. Or people jump in from other professions, actors, and sports people, because their sports career is over, and so now they have to do something because most of them didn't save their money, and I'll just do comedy. That seems pretty easy, and it's not.
Yeah. I got into comedy 6 years ago is all, when my daughter and I went our separate ways and she didn't want to talk anymore. And I needed something bigger than life to hang on to. When your child doesn't want to talk to you, you're like, I don't know that I want to live. Well, if I can make people laugh. So
Yeah, I mean, it can be therapeutic for both the audience and the performer.
yeah.
I've
Have you
probably
done military comedy, Earl?
I've done a few. I've never traveled to, say, like Afghanistan or Japan. I've done like a few of the military bases that are out here, like a Camp Pendleton and Long Beach. There's one, I forget the name of it. And there's also a USO. It's not an office, but it's like a travel. It's at LAX, and they have like a USO branch.
Yes.
I did a comedy show there once. So I mean, I think my sense of humor is pretty dry and dark, and I don't know if I'd be the best fit to. I know you're heavily censored when you go, like when you go to Iraq. You say you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that, because they don't. It's all kinds of religions and political sides, so they don't want you to offend the troops. But I don't do well when I'm told, don't do this, don't do that. I'm not offensive in general in my act, but when I'm told don't talk about this, it makes me want to talk about it. I'm like a little kid.
Yeah.
So
I've been doing comedy for veterans back in my hometown of Portland, Oregon, and I've done comedy in New York at VA hospitals. Just as an individual, I go in and say, I do comedy. Where can I make some veterans laugh?
Right. Yeah, it's good to I tried doing that with like the children's hospital. Like obviously, the kids are very sick, and they don't necessarily want to hear comics. But I was like, I'll read books to kids, or I'll like just stay in the room and I don't know, hold their hand, or make them feel better in some way. And I think they looked up some of my comedy clips on YouTube, and they're like, "Thank you, but we think we'll pass." So, but it's all right. I, uh,
How many?
I try. Oh, I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I try and give back as much as I can in terms of, like I'll donate to homeless shelters and clothing like that. And, so I try and give back in that way. Because I think when you're perceived as not a dirty comic, but maybe slightly controversial, you're going to have trouble getting like charity gigs and stuff like that. Because they don't want to take the chance that you'll, go rogue and you know say something you shouldn't. So I get it.
Yeah. I did comedy in Portland at this great big conglomerate that has homeless shelters, and I was doing comedy every week, and then taking them in the back and teaching them how to do comedy and get on stage at Harvey's Comedy Club.
Oh yeah, I've heard that twice. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
heard they've had trouble paying comics, which is why I've never I'm not going to Portland and with the chance I might get stiffed.
exactly. Yeah, they've had issues between the owners, and so that has been a struggle. But I can tell you that the new owner, if there's anything out there that's left unpaid, Doug wants to know and make it right. So they're making strides at trying to make that all right.
Yeah. I mean, they'd never burn me, but I've never given the opportunity to them to do so. So, uh,
Exactly.
I know there's Club Helium. I guess you'd say it's their competition.
Yeah.
Uh, they have a much better reputation. So I think most A-level comics are going to go to them over Harvey's. But, I hope Harvey's figures it out because there's always room for another comedy club.
Yes, I hope they do too. I know they want to. So hopefully that will happen. I love Hart. The owner of Harvey's went to high school with me, Barry
Okay.
Cullen. Yeah, he's a year older than me, and he didn't know I existed. So it was my job to walk by his house every day and make sure he did. He didn't know who I was till I walked in his comedy club after my daughter and I went our separate ways. And I told him one of these days I'm going to have the guts and I'm going to be up on your stage. And so I made good, and I came back and learned comedy and got up there. So
Yeah, it's really just a matter of saying F it and doing it. There's really no substitute. There's no classes, in my opinion. You just got to get up there, and it's kind of trial by error. You don't learn how to shoot a basketball watching videos. You learn by going out to a court and shooting a basketball. So, congratulations on, having the balls, so to speak, to do it.
and I started when I was 63, and I can relate to what you said about starting it at 30
I
times
mean,
two.
yeah, I mean, when you see like Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock saying they started at 16, you're like, oh man, if I just would have started at 20, where would I be now? But I
Yes.
didn't. So, I don't really look back with regret on too many things, but I
No.
do wish I started earlier.
What, aside from the pandemic and the civil uprising that seems to be going on, especially you're getting a lot of that in the Hollywood area, um, what's in the future for you that you're going to be going after?
Well, I have so much fun doing the cartoon stuff, and it's frankly, it's pretty easy work. I hope to get more cartoons. I'm always, I'd probably go on 3 to 5 auditions a week because I have a home setup for cartoons. But the cartoon world is actually much harder to navigate than stand up because in stand up there's hundreds of comics, but there's also I don't know if there's hundreds of gigs, but there's a lot of gigs. The cartoon world, it's there's not that many gigs and the same actors work. So like everyone always comments on how deep my voice is, which is it is very deep, but it's also there's probably 7 to 8 other deep voice actors, and we all go out for the same parts. So it's instead of going out against 100 other comics to headline maybe 60 clubs, you're going out for one role and it's only 7 other people. So it's much. I never thought I'd say something would be harder than stand up, but to
Wow.
do voiceover work it's 100 times harder in terms of getting actual work.
Wow. You know, not, I don't want you to give the secret away because that will mean that you'll have more competition. But in general, in life, if you're just like your competition, in essence, how do you stand out in any kind of interview?
Well, in voiceover work, it's really just the slightest. It's a tone. So they like on the cartoon I'm on, the Jellies. I'm the only white guy on it. It's all for the most part African American actors, and I'm the dad. So for that show, I mean, you'd have to ask Tyler, the creator, but I think he liked the tone of my voice because it's deep enough to believe I could possibly be black. Uh, just hearing it, and then
Yep.
it's got a hinge, I guess you'd say, of whiteness, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So, like when in season 1, you did your scenes in the recording booth alone, so it's just you, and they'll read you the line that the other person is saying, and then you say your line. But in season 2, we were in the booth with the people we were in the scene with. So like obviously I'm the dad, so there were a lot of scenes with my wife and daughter and son. And the first day I walked into the booth, they were like, there was 3 African American actors, AJ Johnson, who plays my wife, and Phil Lamar, who is like a legend in the voiceover world. He's been in hundreds of things. He plays my son. And then Kylo Kish, who is a very famous rapper. She plays my daughter. And they looked at me and they thought I was a sound engineer. I'm like, no, I'm Barry Jelly. And they were like, well, you're white. And I'm like, well, you guys are black. Let's do the scene. And so it was just fun. They had no idea I was white.
That's amazing.
So in terms of voiceover hints, which I love giving people help, there's really I can't tell someone, well, this is what's going to get you work. It's really just the tone of your voice. Like, I have a friend of mine, she's a very accomplished Instagram and TikTok star, and she has like a gravelly voice. She
I
doesn't
know
sound.
who, I know who, is it KQ?
No, it's I don't want to say her name because then people like
No,
reach out to
don't.
her. And,
No, no.
but she's like she is one of the top Instagram people on earth, and uh,
Hmm.
she has a voice that kind of not. It doesn't sound like a male, but it's very deep for a woman. So she's just blessed with that, and then so it's really voiceover is just genetics. Like one of the guys I constantly go up against, and I don't mean it like in a mean way, but
Yeah.
is a black actor by the name of Billy Brown, who he's that typical, his face, but you don't know his name. He's in like I think 4 TV shows right now currently. He's a very good looking black, slightly older black actor. He's built like a refrigerator. He has a very deep, gravelly voice. It almost sounds like a black Clint Eastwood. And he's just voiceover acting is just really just genetics. Uh, it's just your voice is your voice. Like so, when I get hired, I'm not really. When I said it was easier earlier, I meant I'm not very good at a high voice or any kind of cartoony voice, so I'm not really asked to do much other than what I'm talking with right now, because it's such
Do
a
they,
it's a monotone, very dry, very baritone, deep voice. I can't be like, hey, how you doing? Like I can do it, but it's not very good.
yeah.
So I get
Do
it.
they ever, like they're, like a lot of people do a lot of voices. Do they frown on you coming in and pretending to have a certain voice?
Well, with me, they know my voice is my voice. Like I'm not coming in with a high voice. There's not one clip of me, like in my voiceover reel or demo, where I'm doing a high pitched voice. I mean, I did take I'm very anti classes, but there's a guy out here by the name of Charlie Adler who's like the king of voices. He's like the Robert De Niro of voiceover actors. I'm like, I can learn from this guy. And he would do the opposite with me. He's like, I don't want you to use your deep voice. You already know you're good at that. So he would have me do high voices. And at first I was resistant because it's like, dude, I'm never going to be asked to do this voice. And he's like, I know that, but I'm doing this so you'll struggle with this voice. So when you get in the next cartoon, your deep voice will be much easier just because you won't struggle at all.
Wow.
So he was amazing to work with, and so I think in my case, I'm asked to do a deep voice. That's it.
That's cool. You have your own lane and you stay in it, just like we were talking about rock music.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't really, to be honest with you, have a choice other than to stay in it because I'm not capable really of doing a high pitched voice or talking like a woman or talking like a little kid. Like Phil Lamar, he's amazing. Like he can talk like a 6-year-old child, and if you close your eyes, it sounds like a 6-year-old child. And he can do a voice as almost as deep as mine with proficiency. Like there's people like him who are just versatile, and then there's I'm like a home run hitter. I'm only good at hitting home runs. If you ask me to lay down a bunt, it's not going to happen.
I totally get baseball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, like in hockey, there's guys who aren't that good defensively, but they're good goal scorers, and that would be me. But then there's guys like Phil Lamar in hockey who are good at everything. They can play defense, they can have score goals, they can pass. I'm the guy you put out there when you want the goal scored.
This is awesome. You're so awesome to talk to. Do you have anything that you want to encourage people about, like going for your goals or getting through a pandemic, or how to stay positive in a negative time, or how to be nice to other people, whatever? What do you want to tell people?
I mean, well, I learned how to be nice to other people through my parents. My dad was like he was like a very interesting guy. He was like MacGyver meets Bill Gates meets Elon Musk. He was good at everything he did. He was a scratch golfer. He was self-taught, which is pretty hard to be essentially a pro golfer and be self-taught. And he was as nice to the caddies at the golf course as he was to his billionaire friends. He was friends with prostitutes from his church. He was as nice to them as he was to James Garner, his friend, the actor. Uh, so that taught me to everyone's equal, as my mom said. And I don't know if we can swear on this podcast, but I'll clean it up as best I can. She's like, Earl, treat everyone the same because we all shit out of the same hole. And it's true. So in that regard, like especially in the yesterday I was, and I just made an Instagram post about it. I was throwing away some hockey jerseys with my name on them because I can't sell them and they have my name on them. And so but they're very heavy. They're pro weight hockey jerseys. And lately it's been very cold at night. And so I'm throwing these jerseys in the trash. It's probably 5 or 6 of them. And this homeless kid comes up to me and goes, hey, can I have those? I'm like, they have my name on them, dude. You probably don't want them. And he's like, oh, I live in Venice with about 5 or 6 of my friends, and we're all homeless, and we get very cold at night. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So if you're walking in Venice in the next few months and you see a homeless posse with Earl Skakel hockey jerseys on, you'll now know the story behind it. But you should be nice to everyone like that. I probably will never see that person again. But maybe because I was nice to him, maybe one night he'll give one of those jerseys to someone who's cold, and so he'll be nice to that I really think it spreads. Like if you're nice, to one person, they're nice to another person. We can help get through times like this.
Yes.
It's
Awesome. My parents came over after Hitler. My dad went through the camps and came here, and he fought in Portland, Oregon for the police to treat the Black people and the hookers the right way. The ladies of the night and the Black people were being treated very badly in Portland, Oregon. And he fought tooth and nail weekly. Didn't give up.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, obviously with the riots and the protesting, it's you see it from both sides. Obviously what happened to George Floyd is like wrong and horrible, and then when I was walking the dog with I have a dog here, and my fiance, the other night we were walking, and we live in West Hollywood, so it's kind of ground zero right now for all the protests and riots to a degree, because we're in the middle. Like you have downtown LA to the east, and we have Beverly Hills to the west. West Hollywood's in the center, so that's where they all kind of converge. And there was like, I think 2 or 3 National Guard tanks and a bunch of weirdly shaped like military trucks with probably 20 armed to the gills sheriffs on each truck, and probably 90% of them looked at me and Chandler and the dog, and they waved to us, because you could tell they just wanted to see a friendly face for once. Like, I'd say probably, not to turn this into a political thing, but like, I'd say 10 to 15% of the cops are bad and the rest are great. And these were that 85% where, I started to cry a little bit, because you could just tell here are these huge, tough dudes with guns and all kinds of whatever weapons they have on these trucks and tanks. And they just waved to us like, please, someone wave back to us. We're not the bad guys. Those cops in Minnesota are, those 4 and others, but so,
everybody, everywhere we look right now, everybody's hurting around the world. You can't escape pain.
It's well, it's just still going on. I mean, at some point you gotta like go, who are we hiring to be cops? Like, there needs to be a rehaul in how they're screened, and certainly how they're trained, because you could tell that. But I mean, you could tell like the defense for that one cop in particular is going to be like, hey, this is how I'm trained. And then the other 3 who I guess got arrested over this week too, they're going to say, well, we didn't think he was doing anything wrong because this is how we're trained. So it's like, well, maybe you guys should be trained differently. But I also know of several people who were like bullied in high school and bullied in college, and they became cops so they could have that power over people to be like, do what I say or I'm going to beat the whatever out of you. It's just African Americans.
I survived brain trauma in 1996, and it brought up a lot of PTSD that I had that I didn't know I had. And I think that cops are all day long, they're getting around trauma, and they don't know when they have PTSD sometimes. And if they go to a shrink and confess that they're not feeling right, they'll lose their job. So they're out on the streets getting more trauma daily. So I don't know. Sometimes I think we should hire people to be cops at a dispensary. At least they'd be more chill.
We also get people who aren't like skilled enough to be uh, cops. You know, like when I was a kid growing up in Bel Air, they had a security force, the Bel Air Patrol, and you could definitely tell looking back now as an adult that some of these guys weren't good enough to be cops, and oh, this is the best I can do. But they still bullied people, you know, like, you know, I would see them speak to like employees at the hotels that were around my house in a bad way, like, what are you going to do? I'm a cop, you're not. Uh,
Absolutely.
so, but you know, if I ever get, you know, in a situation where I need to call a cop, I'm going to call one. So hopefully it's one of the 85%.
Hopefully.
I mean, it's
Yes.
like just the, I mean, this is kind of a story out of left field, but maybe in December, me and Chandler were walking Lois and we saw it was like a black transgendered woman and she looked like she'd been attacked. She was wobbling all over the street. And then this white dude, it was like watching a vulture operate. He kind of picks her up off the street and shuffles her off into the alley. And me and Chandler were like, we better go make sure this lady's okay. And then we catch up to them a block later. And he was about to sexually assault this person. And so I called the cops. And you could literally see the West Hollywood Sheriff's uh, Department from where we were. It took them 2 hours go by, they don't come. And, you know, the first two times I called and, you know, I described the victim who we were with. Oh, she's black, possibly transgendered. And then Chandler called and said, hi, you know, I think she said, I'm pregnant. And we just stopped a sexual assault. They were there in 2 seconds. Like,
Wow.
they didn't care. I think if I would have said it's a white girl, they would have been there in 2 seconds. And then, you know, the one cop who was definitely in the 15% category, he was like yelling at me and Chandler saying, why didn't you guys call an ambulance? I'm like, well, we just stopped a rape. That's a crime. And he's like, well, she seems to be okay. And like she was passed out, like she was not okay. And so, you know, I was depressed for like couple weeks after that. Going, that's this cop didn't care just because she's black and transgendered, I guess. So you know, because there's a lot of crime around me, so I see how different races are treated.
Yes. My daughter went to a 98% Black school in Renton, Washington in 91. And she didn't know much about talking to people of color. So she went to the library and read up on it. But unfortunately, they put the N word in the book.
Right.
And they didn't explain that it's inappropriate. So, you know, somebody said, you know, are you racist? And she said, no, I don't think anything less of people, and used the N word. And it was a Black person that asked her. And, you know, I never saw, I heard about racism, but when my daughter was in high school, the garbage company wouldn't pick up trash at the high school. They got the equipment after every other school in the district just because of the color of the students.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of racist people out there. There's a lot, I mean, certainly living in West Hollywood, I see homophobia a fair amount. You wouldn't think I would, because
Yeah.
like in our building, you know, we live in like a 30-unit building. It's me and Chandler, and then one other couple, and then everyone else is gay. So, you know, you think it'd be, you know, there's just a lot of bad people out there, but there's also a lot of great people out there. So,
You're
you know.
hearing some stories, you know, of people that are out there trying to do good. For the most majority, the protesters are in there trying to cause good. And unfortunately, once in a while, there's going to be a mob mentality. I mean, they're trying to get something accomplished, and they might be getting mistreated before they get violent. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you have to separate the protesters from the looters. You know, like the people destroying Fairfax last week. They weren't protesters. They were a lot were from out of town gangs, which is crazy because like the one store they really hit hard, Supreme, which is a very high end shoe store, rappers go there and they serve the minority community. So it's like you guys are like ruining a store because like you just want to steal from it. Like they are part of the solution. Like they help service this neighborhood. Like I'm not saying it would make me feel better if they looted a store in Beverly Hills, but like I've never understood why they were looting the stores on Fairfax because Fairfax is a very minority friendly. A lot of Jews, a lot of rappers have stores, and when they release their albums, they do release parties in that area, and so it was heartbreaking to see.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. Well, I thank you for being a real person today and not having a mask on to have us see you just be funny, but to be real. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for doing this. It's fun to, talk and not necessarily be doing jokes, and I think some comics, not all, they like to show their serious side too. So, in this day and age, I think people like to see the human side of people, not just doing jokes. So thank you, Linda, very much for doing this. You're doing a good service.
Thank you so much. It's been so wonderful to get to know you, and I'll be watching you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, no, not Instagram, MySpace, and YouTube under Earl Skakel. And you have a podcast called Inappropriate Earl.
Yes, I'm not even on MySpace anymore. My account, I think, is still up, but I think I'm the oldest living person on TikTok. So
wow. I'm on there. I'm 69 years old. I'm on there.
Oh, okay, great. Well, now I don't feel so bad, but no, I'm just kidding. Well, the great thing about my social media is it's all one handle. It's just at Earl Skakel. So, if you want to reach out to me, it's just EARL SKAKEL.
Yeah, you guys get out and support real people.
Thank you, Linda.
So much for being real.
I'll see you later.
See you on your Facebook Live.
You got it.
Bye.
Everybody's